started. Everybody ready? Yeah. So anybody to turn on them? Can you
Do I know how to do that?
go over that black box
It's
on
over
the
in that
left?
black box.
Right by the headphones? See the two
The
headphones?
headphones, this guy.
Yep, on top of it.
This one?
Yep,
Got it.
we're good.
Scott's gonna lose his job.
All right, everybody good to go?
Yeah.
All right, good evening to everyone on this frigid Monday, the January 21st evening. Welcome everyone to the City of Mount Vernon Council meeting. Not aware of any changes to the agenda that we have in front of us.
Move approval of the agenda.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. In regards to the agenda that we do have tonight, as everybody can see, it's a little longer than what we're used to, so we'll try to be efficient, but yet take care of everything that we need to. So with that said, is there anybody that would like to address the council? Communications? Seeing no one, we'll move forward with the consent agenda. Bear with me as I rattle through a number of these items. Approval of council minutes from our January 7th, 2019 council meeting. Approval of liquor license for Wilkie Liquors. Appoint Mike Boozer to the EMA. Appoint Mike Boozer and Doug Shannon, Lynn County 911. Appoint Tom Weasler, Mayor Pro Tem. Appoint Deb Herman, Tom Weasler to the Personnel Committee. Appoint Eric Rodabush and Scott Rose to the Safety Committee. Appoint Deb Herman and Stephanie West to the Finance Committee. Appoint Scott Rose and Eric Rodabush to Infrastructure. Stephanie West and Deb Herman to Economic Development. Appoint Eric Rodabush and Chris Nosler to the Fire Department Advisory Board. Appoint Tom Weasler, liaison to Cole Public Library, as well as Cornell College. Appoint Deb Herman, Housing Commission. Appoint Roman Myers to the Park and Recreation Board. Appoint Doug Shannon, Derek Warren, Lori Lynch, and Lisa Cannon to the Lisbon Mount Vernon Ambulance Board. That's all that said, I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Scott, are you hooked up, ready to go? You all set?
Apologies for being late.
Nope, you're fine, I just wanted to get started due to the
Yep.
size of it, so you haven't missed anything to this point. All right, next item is public hearing on ordinance amending ordinance 1119-2018A, vacating and selling a portion of the north-south 16-foot alley located adjacent to 824 and 906 Summit Avenue within the city limits of Mount Vernon, Iowa. I will now open the public hearing. Anybody that would like to comment? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. Proceed to ordinance 121-2019A, amending ordinance 1119-2018A, vacating and selling a portion of the north-south 16-foot alley located adjacent to 824 and 906 Summit Avenue within the city limits of Mount Vernon, Iowa. Chris?
Yes, so it's not a 16-foot alley right away, it's a 25-foot, I'll call it street right away. It's part of the original plat. So it's Park Avenue, street right away. So if you look at the amendment, we changed that from 16 feet to 25 feet in both the actual ordinance and then the property description, as well as the conditions change. Instead of giving them an additional 3 months from the time that this one was going to be adopted, we just stuck with the dates of the original 3-month period. So you'll see March 28th, 2019. Each side will have until then to exercise their right to purchase their portion. All other conditions stay the same.
I think we probably talked ad nauseam about this. Is there anybody that has any additional questions or comments or anything?
I'd like to address.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
If you would name and address, please, sir.
Oh, Jeff Martin. I live at 111 3rd Avenue North on Crest Hill. This is really busy. And I have lots of kids having fun. Anyway, this is primarily, I think, directed to Chris. Do we have an ordinance that concerns vacating streets?
We have state code
Okay,
that deals with vacating streets.
okay. Is that the same as vacating all of those?
Same.
Okay.
It's state code relates to vacation of public, private, public
Okay.
right of ways, so they don't really make a distinction between street or alleys.
Okay, that was my question.
We used to have a local ordinance and probably will be looking at adopting a local ordinance once again. The state code does not require you to go to P and Z. I think it needs to go to P and Z. Some aspects, but a while back they basically repealed our ordinance, local ordinance, and just stayed with state code.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Unless there's any other questions or discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
I move approval of ordinance with the amendments as indicated to ordinance 1-21-2019.
I'll second.
Comments? No comments, roll call please, Sue.
Bush.
Yes.
West.
Yes.
Kiesler.
Yes.
Herman.
Yes.
Rose.
Yes.
Next item is public hearing on ordinance amending chapter 27 of the Housing Commission of the Mount Vernon Municipal Code of Mount Vernon, Iowa. And I'll open the public hearing. Anybody that would like to comment on this? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Move to ordinance 121-2019B, amending chapter 27 Housing Commission of the Municipal Code of Mount Vernon, Iowa. Chris?
We go from 9 to 7, a couple other changes. With 9 members, we allowed up to 2 representatives from outside the city limits. We reduced that to 1. And then the statement, instead of generally consist of these representatives, is now changed to attempt to include. Gives you more freedom to just put well-meaning, intelligent people on the commission without having to meet a specific designation, so.
Yeah, hopefully that'll help.
I like what that list represents though, and so I'm glad it's there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and generally speaking, it still does represent that. We've had a couple members step away. Scott Peterson is going to be stepping away, so with the appointment of Deb tonight, we have 7 members now, and again, for the most part, representing this list.
Balance.
Yep.
Scott chairing that group.
Scott was chairing the group. They're supposed to be discussing that tomorrow, or Wednesday.
Anybody else, any other questions? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve ordinance 1-21-2119B, amending the Housing Commission membership, basically with those 3 changes.
And I'll second.
Comments? No comments, roll call please, Sue.
Rose.
Yes.
Kiesler.
Yes.
West.
Yes.
Herman.
Yes.
Bush.
Yes.
All right, next item is under old business. I will need a motion to table each of these items. So we'll start with the Mount Vernon annexation policy plan. Motion on the table.
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So with that said, discussion and consideration of filing Mount Vernon annexation policy plan. Chris?
So, a few months back, we kind of discussed the parameters of what you wanted to see out of an annexation plan / policy. And you kind of talked about the basics and just kind of recommendations. So, try to pare it down to 4 pages. Probably could have been longer, so I hope I didn't pare it down too much. But in essence, the recommendation is to wait. There are other opportunities for the city to pursue that are less strenuous and far less invasive than annexation is. I do expect to potentially see annexation where the interchange is at. Maybe. It kind of depends on the landowners. I don't believe that we tend to need to force that annexation to occur. As I've stated in the policy, the city doesn't necessarily gain a considerable amount through annexation unless there is a subdivision of some sort that has multiple houses where you're gaining a lot of value. But if you can see, there's a 10-year sliding scale tax abatement for each of those individuals coming in, and not till about year 4, somewhere about year 4, do both sides start feeling it. So the city starts to feel some of the tax money that's coming in, the homeowners start to feel the increased taxes that they're paying in the city. I have reached out to Lisbon already, and discussed this with Connie. She was on vacation last week, so we plan to get together to talk about a moratorium agreement. Lisbon is the only community anywhere close to Mount Vernon that would cause us to have a moratorium agreement. For the most part, we've got kind of a line of demarcation that's already been established on our western border, our eastern border. And I think it's just more or less formalizing that. With the bypass plan, we have the county at the table, so our hope is that we'll have a fringe area agreement. We've extended the subdivision regulations to 2 miles. So we've done everything that I think we need to without going through the formal annexation process. So I do know that when I arrived, there was a large push to annex as much ground as possible, but in my research, I still haven't found a need for that.
And I think a lot of that was just because people didn't know what they didn't know.
Right.
So they were just under the assumption that
Couldn't
they
echo
need
that
to
more.
grab.
Yeah, the fact that there are other 2 mile, or the fringe area agreements and subdivision regulations that we can extend out beyond. I mean, going into the entire bypass process, my understanding was either you annexed or you didn't. Those, it was a very binary kind of decision.
Right.
And knowing, so I view this as a great education tool, not only for us, but also folks as we go out talking about the bypass. So, yeah, I was very pleased to
And I
just
made
have
that,
it boiled down to 4 pages.
I made the comment to, might have actually made it to the press. Those that are going to attempt to bypass certain rules are going to bypass certain rules, and they're going to look for that competitive edge. For the most part, most commercial entities will want to locate inside a city if they can, just so that they have all of those services available, especially fire and water.
Yep.
So I'm not overly worried about a large box retail individual trying to locate outside the city limits just to get around the city. Now, with that being said, could it happen? Yes. I think we can go ahead and talk about the annexation process when that happens. But the thing that I think everybody needs to understand is the state did clamp down on annexing down highways, annexing large chunks of ground, only to have it sit there and not provide them,
Yep.
any city services. So it really has challenged communities to be much smarter about when they annex and what they're trying to annex.
10 years sounds like a long time, but it's really not.
No, and I think the biggest issue is, especially when you're trying to annex ag property, they're used to open burning. They have livestock. They do certain things that we don't allow inside the city. So then you end up signing annexation agreements with all of these properties, and then trying to track who gets what is problematic. So if the fire department were to say go out to a house and through that annexation agreement we allow them to continue to open burn if they didn't know, there's not really a master document that they can go back to for all of those conditions, and I'm speaking from experience. So I think the best thing to do is just like I said, when it comes to annexation, sometimes reaction is the best remedy to a certain extent. So,
And you're not concerned about the time frame? If we were to get word that there was a big box store looking at getting out there, let's say, that we could react to it? quickly?
yes, but I guess even if we were to try and annex out there, our argument would be a struggle to begin with, I guess, put it this way. So we would have to look at if, let's just say a big box does want to go out there right now. We would have to force annex that property in to control the zoning, and then we have to provide services within 3 years to it. So
I'm not saying I'm in
No.
favor of that, because I
So-
know the bypass plan is adamantly opposed to that sort of
It-
activity out there, but I'm just trying to
it
foresee
would
what-
be a struggle,
Mhm.
an immense struggle either way for, I think, anybody sitting at the table. Again, I will say, you know, Walmart, Target, Hy-Vee, Fairway, they don't tend to park themselves just outside the city limits to get around rules. They've got enough attorneys that they'll sift through your existing rules and find loopholes. And they have. I mean, we talked about the fact that we have square footage requirements. And I don't think anything over 10,000 square feet can technically be built in very many places in Mount Vernon. So what have they all done? They've pared down and they made these neighborhood like Walgreens type stores that fall to just under 10,000 square feet. So they're smart. They'll figure it out if they really want to be in a location bad enough. So I think the statement would be, if we were to annex because of that, we would be annexing out of fear. And I don't think it's a good model.
I agree.
I agree. Anybody else have any questions on that? You'd like a motion to approve this plan, correct?
Yeah, that, I mean, obviously you can change this policy, as it's a policy, you can change this whenever you would like, but at least if anybody walks through the door and asks what our take on annexation is, we can hand them this.
And that's supposed to be something that we would look at on an annual basis, or obviously.
Yeah, I think, you know, here in a couple of years when we've got the bypass finally open and, you know, if there is obviously interest from property owners surrounding the city limits and they want to come in voluntarily, then
Yeah.
you might have to revisit this as well.
Well, in that case, I would move approval of the annexation policy / plan as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So again, need a motion to untable the pay application 1.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, discussion consideration of pay application number 1, Lester Bursch Family Community Wellness Center. Chris?
The pay application is in the amount of $279,216.05. If anybody has driven past the site, they will have seen that there's at least that much work complete. You cannot see the blankets that are covered by snow right at the moment that are covering the footings, but my understanding is the bricklayers are hoping to move in this week to start building their shelter. Since it's going to be -1, they may wait a week. But as of right now, things are on schedule, so.
Anybody have any questions? Comments? Otherwise entertain a motion.
Move approval of the pay application number 1 for the Lester Burge Family Community Center project in the amount of 200. Wow.
Here, this
Are
one.
you there? Thank you. $279,216.05.
And I would second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, next item, motions for approval, consideration of claims list. Entertain a motion when someone is ready to do so.
One question of this probably directed to Chief Shannon, but I know there's some allowance for athletic membership. Does that sound right?
Right.
Would that be something that would transfer over to our center when that, I mean, there's been some discussion about that.
That can be used at any local fitness center.
Okay.
You know.
Hopefully they would use our
Chief will highly encourage.
That's city, all the employees get $100.
Oh, yeah.
In that case, I would move approval of the claims list as presented.
Well, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, discussion consideration of amendment number 2 to the professional services agreement, OPN. Chris?
So we've added some parameters to OPN's play. Specifically, we included a trail to connect the high school to our site, so there's an easy walk beyond the western portion of the site. They have 30 parking spots in our lot, so instead of cutting across that drainage area on the grass, we just said that's, where they're gonna go, and it'll kind of come up by the tennis courts. So there was an additional $6,000 for that site work, and then the furnishings and security we broke out, but they are of a size that there's some question, at least on the security side of things, whether it should be part of the overall bid package. So the state law does not allow us to bid individual packages if the sum is greater than the bid threshold. So to be on the safe side, we're gonna go ahead and bid the security package out for sure, as we would any other project, because we're expecting it to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $75,000 to $100,000. That's the cameras, the door readers, the operating system. So we've asked the design team to take care of the specifications together so that we're bidding apples to apples. So overall, we've changed OPM's contractor, asked them to change an amount of $39,000. It's percentage-wise in accordance with the original contract, so nothing out of the ordinary there. But if you have any questions?
These are additional charges from what the original?
Correct, these are changes to what we've asked them to do.
So it's not really a change order, but it's a change in scope.
Change in scope.
Okay, would be more accurate.
So these changes allow us to go out and competitively bid, that they're putting together.
They're putting the
bid package.
specifications together and the bid packages together for each of these items. The site design work, we were hoping, outside of the trail, we were also having them look at where the pool is at, if there was any way that we could use that ground until a pool was potentially constructed, or that phase was moved forward. So we looked at a couple different options, none of them were feasible. But for the most part, that'll be for the trail project.
Is the work on the trail 100% on our property, or is it partially on the school?
100% on theirs.
So are they gonna join to us?
No, we were joining up to the sidewalk so that we can walk in.
Their sidewalk comes right up against our property?
Our property goes, actually, our property almost takes in a portion of their sidewalk that's already in existence here. So our property comes right here, and their sidewalk actually kind of comes right
Kind
across
of
there.
bellies into our property?
Yeah.
So, okay.
And they didn't have to worry about it before because they own both chunks, so obviously we weren't gonna have them move that little chunk of sidewalk to. We've got a sharing arrangement for everything, so our detention now sits on property jointly owned. We got detention, they got half their tennis courts. It kinda ended up working out in the end.
After the fact.
Yeah.
I've got to say that, the security package topping $75,000, it concerns me when I initially see it, but then I also remember that our staffing plan is not heavy at the beginning. In fact, it's very slim. And my feeling is that the security package, some of those funds that would be invested in that are recovered by what we don't have in staff.
Yeah, so we feel pretty strongly about the fact that this facility has to be open for adults 24/7. In order to do that and not staff it, and make sure everybody feels safe, the locker rooms will actually be similar to City Hall, the doors go locked. There are 2 family bathrooms that are open. They're basically single stall type situation, so they're easier to track. PD will be able to monitor this, as well as myself and Matt and maybe one other staff person at any
Remotely?
time from home,
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
remotely.
that
Okay.
was the key.
Right,
So
right.
there are 42 proposed cameras,
41 now.
41.
Oh, we're turning
Um,
down.
And it's, so
44 to 41.
as we sat down and discussed the camera locations, and this package could come in less than 75, but we're banking on the fact that it probably won't. We wanted to make sure that if we did have an issue, that we had all of the angles covered. There are some small blind spots in the building. I don't think you can get away from that completely, but we wanted to be able to go back to the film and say, you know, yes, here's your child, you know, breaking the piece of art that's there. And we will have art there. I mean, it is, centers are, you know, it's both a wellness center and a community center. The security aspect and as we write these policies for those that want to rent the community center side of things, you know, there will be some parameters there as well, so. I did not want to skimp on the security aspect, knowing full well that in order to make our reduced staffing plan, we had to be able to feel comfortable about remoting in and checking on the building when we needed to.
And I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole, but on the 24-hour access, I assume that wouldn't be to the entire building. Workout facilities, restrooms, locker rooms, that kind of stuff? Or am I wrong?
Correct. So you wouldn't be able to use the rock wall
So-
when nobody's in the facility. The locker rooms are closed off. Most likely the aerobics room will be closed off. The one community room, the smaller community room that has the kitchen, might have to be open past hours if they plan to use the kitchen, although there is an opening to that outside, so maybe we'll be able to close those doors off and then keep them locked. But yeah, it'll be limited access, but from a square footage standpoint, you're gonna get like 75 or 80% of the building at
Right.
your disposal.
Yeah.
The turf room will likely be closed off at 10 o'clock unless it's rented for some reason.
I think that's important.
So, yeah, and that goes back to the door hardware, everything now like City Hall,
Right.
based upon magnets and hit some switches and close them off, so.
But your blind spots will definitely be your locker rooms and everything. You can't have cameras in locker rooms
No.
and stuff like that.
So we have cameras that are stationed looking into the locker room spaces, and we've eliminated the locker rooms, trying to eliminate people hiding in the locker rooms. So these family rooms, our staff can check before they leave, and they don't have equipment where people could tend to hide. But yes, we will have blind spots. There's portions underneath the track that you can't see 100%.
Those,
The cameras are underneath the track, so right behind the camera on either side is kind of a blind spot as well, so
do those family bathrooms have showers?
one. And that was kind of, like I said, kind of imperative that we give adults the most options.
Yep. I think it's important to have, yeah, that's good.
Well, it's all about finding that balance.
Okay.
That is what we're really talking about.
Yep, yep.
So,
Usership.
so if I have a car, I guess I got a card that I can swipe and enter the building, so the police will know that Eric Rodovich is in that building right now.
Correct.
Right.
And every member of your family, right now what we're talking about is every member of your family will have a card. So my 12-year-old will have his own card, and if
With
he goes
his name
to swipe,
attached to it.
yes, if he goes to swipe his card, he will not get in there past 10 o'clock. If he steals my card and goes in there, we will know, because we can do an audit of the door readers on a daily basis. So it's as safe as we can try and make it, and that's kind of the goal.
Well, it sounds well thought through.
Yeah, I think so too. I just want to state, you guys, I mean, I'm fully in support of this stuff, but I just want you guys to remember, as you go forward with a revenue model, that the community center has to be for the whole of the community. And there's going to be people that are not gonna be able to use that facility without the sliding scale. So as you guys are working that revenue model, not everyone's gonna be paying 100%. I want it accessible to our entire community. And I just want you to remember that as you're doing those projections.
Yeah, I think the goal, at least what Matt and I have initially talked about, is we currently use Southeast Loan to provide scholarships to our programs, and we'll probably continue to use Southeast Loan in that capacity if they would be willing. But our mantra has been usership. I think the way to this facility breaking even on a yearly basis is for people to be using it. And if we cut people out,
Well, and there could be, we could start a sponsorship program where some families choose to sponsor other families or other community members. So that could be something that's, we haven't even discussed that, but I think there's
Yeah.
ways of working it.
Yeah, Nicole from Southeast Lynn and I have already had discussions in
I know
regards
you
to a
have,
low
which is
income
great.
assistance program. One of the keys is gonna be obviously funding that. So we've talked about in the future, maybe not in the short term, but the long term, the monies that is gonna be accumulated in regards to the LMI from the developments, the two developments that are added. That's entirely up to the Housing Commission as far as what direction they wanna go, but there could be some dollars available for that. Another thing that, Nicole and I have talked about is transportation to and from the facility, and that could be another option down the road that comes to light. So we've had some discussions, absolutely. So yeah, I want to see a low-income assistance program within this facility. I think it should be usership for everybody, like you said. That's our ultimate goal, absolutely.
Glad to hear.
Good, thanks, Mike. All right, that's it, I'll entertain a motion for the amendment number 2.
I would so move approval of amendment number 2, amendment to the opium contract for the West River Community Wellness Center program.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, discussion and consideration of engine purchase for the fire department. I see we have Chief Goodlow.
yeah, so this is a projected purchase that, if you looked at your CIP, we had in for fiscal year 20. Doing our due diligence, Chief has paid close attention to the tariffs and the changing prices. And by the quote that you see, we can get a fairly substantial deal to the tune of over $20,000 if we purchase the vehicle now before the results of the tariffs increase costs a little bit. They already 7%?
Yeah, 7% this spring was their initial increase. Typically, they've been just on a yearly increase of about 3 to 4%, so they're predicted to go 10% right now. I don't know what will happen further down the road here, but I know it's probably not going to go down.
Yeah.
So, once again, we're going to be fortunate with the prepayment option, having put a plug in again for our equipment. I mean, it's still been revolving around. Being able to prepay for this as well as the 3% cost savings there, we're looking at almost $40,000 in savings. I know this will be our third vehicle, if we do move forward with it, that we have prepaid for, and it's going to push us up right around roughly $100,000 for the last 3 vehicles that we paid for up front that we've saved in total. So that and air packs as well. So it's a good venue for us. So thank you very much for supporting that in the past. But like Chris said, I feel free to throw whatever questions you have my way. This vehicle has been a absolute lemon that we're replacing. So this is a much needed and anticipated replacement. I know Sue has rolled her eyes several times seeing the statements come across her desk for thousands of dollars of upkeep that we've kept on this vehicle for something that's only about what's a 2002 model. So that and it's pretty shocking, sticker shock. Every time we've had something done to it, it's been a very costly endeavor. So like I said, updating it with something new new and improved, and it's our mainline vehicle that will be responding to vehicle accidents and any type of more specialized emergency scenes, as well as fire suppression too, so.
There is, if you saw the quote, the chassis prepayment was another option that I was looking at. However, with an 8 to 9 month turnaround and the amount due 120 days before delivery, it was likely going to put us in the same fiscal year, this fiscal year regardless. And then we lost just about $11,000 worth of savings. So initially, like I said, when I was doing the math, I was like, oh, if we could get it into 2 fiscal years, that would be wonderful. But the way that they have the chassis payment system set up and the timing when we would look to purchase, it's not going to do us any good. So, you know, as I stated in my memo, the prepayment will give an ending fund balance in this particular fund a negative balance going into next fiscal year. Not overly concerning because we have tax dollars coming in next fiscal year that will take care of the negative balance fairly quick. We will get a notification on our audit that we have a negative balance in that account, as we do with stormwater right now. So it's nothing earth shattering. We don't have to transfer funds one place to the other. We will have to do a budget amendment for these dollars specifically, so probably at the next council meeting should we choose to move forward with this purchase. As I said, normally in the past it's been 50-50 deal with the fire district. However, we're trying to transition into a contract basis, so there was no point in going and trying to get 50% of those dollars back from them now if we just have to turn around and pay them back if we go to the contract basis. So the levy currently has $485,000 in it, and we're expecting about another $40,000 yet this fiscal year. So we would, like I said, we would be at a positive fund balance next year by about $17,000 to $20,000 by the end of the fiscal year. As I pointed out to Chief, keep in mind that that fund needs to probably sit for a year or two and rebuild itself before you make any other large purchases, which they're well aware of as well. So,
What would happen with the O2 model?
I've been just in contact with a brokerage firm that brokers used fire trucks, so just in the beginning phases of that. I don't even want to fathom what it's worth, but I tell you it's probably going to be more than $10,000. So,
It's gonna go on.
be
the
happy if
rates.
it's anything more than that. So if I, you know.
It's not substantial in terms of its value.
If it's, you know, I would say, you know, probably under $100,000, but not researching that market is very strange on what, you know, what departments are out there in need of. It's very, very dynamic on what it would be.
those are the timing. I will say the brokerage firms that we use to offload fire equipment do a very good job, but it depends on who's looking at the time, how many vehicles are out there. If we could find a rural fire district, most likely would take this piece of equipment because they're not worried about the insert ISO rating, their insurance safety rating as much. They don't put as near as many miles on it. So hopefully, ideally, there'll be plenty looking when we sell this model.
So I gotta admit, I'm a little bit overwhelmed by the number of options that are provided here. And I feel like,
remove this and it does that.
it would be
and-
nice to see, you know, what your recommendations are for these items on.
So we sat down, we had basically an apparatus committee put together that got a broad spectrum of membership on, so we got some newer members and members been around for a while, and some that have some good insight into this. So at first glance, and once I said, we sit down and really go through this with a fine tooth comb. There will probably be a little bit more, but at first blush, there's roughly right around $15,000 to $17,000 of fluff that we found in it. And I've been through it about 4 times in the last week. Usually ends in slumber when I start reading it, but there is
Imagine where
some-
we are.
Yeah, I enjoy this stuff, so, but, you know, there's things like, you know, we've already talked about, like some of the electric windows. They've got multiples of some things on there, siren wise, that we don't really need to, we can cut down to 1. And like they said in there too, the light package is kind of a high-end light package. Our last engine that we purchased from them, we went with a different vendor and have had good luck with it, so that'll be some additional savings above and beyond that 15,000 that I kind of mentioned earlier. So with that, you know, there is always some items that do get tweaked or adjusted. I'm not sure if Chris forwarded the email too, but we had figured there's about $20,000 or so of loose equipment that needs to be updated that we have now, or modified, or things that we don't have that we've been planning on purchasing. So with that, our Volunteer Firefighter Association that handles all our fundraising has earmarked $10,000 already for that, and I think with our upcoming fundraiser this spring too, it's just timely that we allocate those funds as well to that. So that's an additional, you know, $20,000 in loose equipment that we can offset with the purchase price. So that's always a added bonus for us as well. So we really appreciate those funds. But yeah, as far as the options and things, just at first glance, there's engine change is the first one on the first page. Is going down, you know, decreasing 20 horsepower on an engine and saving $8,000 is a doable thing in our eyes versus our some of our former vehicles, we weren't able to do that. So stuff like that we've kind of identified and tapped some resources, asked some questions about that stuff as well. Once we sit down and if you plan on moving forward with this, and it'll be a line item by line item of, hey, we're gonna, you know, we want a red light here and a blue light there, and I got, you know, so those areas will be able to be trimmed down a little bit from there on out. So
If we were to move forward with this tonight, then I would ask that the original CIP amount was 600,000, so at a price not to exceed 600,000, so we're kind of starting at the 559, and then they can work through the line items as needed.
I know in a previous meeting, we had talked about our bond rating, having something like, having a negative balance like this would
No,
affect that.
we have, you know, we wouldn't necessarily have to go in a negative balance. We have other fund balances that we could transfer over just to not make this go in a negative balance, but it's a lot of back and forth money movement. It will not affect our bond rating at all. To give you some idea, we're currently working with a stormwater fee that's $140,000 in the hole and hazard.
Right.
So overall, the general fund, what we on this has somewhere between 1.3 and 1.4 million.
So if
And that's
we needed
really
to,
what
we
they're
could
looking at.
shift 40 grand if we needed to.
If we needed to, yes. And again, the auditors are just going to make note of it and ask us what is our remedy. Obviously, the 93,000, 95,000 plus in taxes that we expect to take in this line item next year will offset and then some. So,
Okay. I just wanted to, yeah.
like I said, I always want to make sure that you're aware that it'll be noted in the audit, but it's not a significant issue.
Anybody else have any questions, concerns, comments? I think it just makes sense, quite honestly, from a fiscal management standpoint.
We're gonna do it one way or the other, instead
Yeah.
of 20 grand doing it way A instead of way B.
Our hands are being forced a little bit in terms of timing, but
In that case, I would move approval of the engine purchase not to exceed the CIP indicated $600,000.
I'll second it.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Chief.
Mayor and Council.
Next item is discussion consideration of blower motor control replacement wastewater. Chris?
We had originally talked about, there's two of these. blower motor controls. And we had originally talked about maybe including them into the overall UV disinfection and screw pump replacement project. After talking to the engineer, and I just realized I did not give you the quote, but it's just under $6,300 to do one control. But the markup with Davis-Bacon requirements, when you go through the SRF funding on a $6,300 unit, outweighs trying to wait and include this in a much larger project. We do have the funds available to do one in each fiscal year. So I think from a timing perspective, we get one done this fiscal year at $6,300 and then next fiscal year do the other. We have to shut these controls down and operate one or the other, just with some of the issues that we have, and I myself cannot explain everything that's going on. If you want further communication on this, it's not an emergency. We can have Alex here and he can explain further, but it is causing us some issues at the plant. And again, I was trying to hold off and see if it would be beneficial to do it under the SRF funding that we're going to borrow, but everything has to be accounted for, and we have to, again, go through all of the Davis-Bacon requirements, prevailing wage, things of that nature for those that are unaware what that is. So it really marks up the cost of a smaller purchase like this.
Just doesn't make any
seem very
sense.
sensible.
So what does the motor exactly, the blower motor exactly do? Does it vacate toxic gases, or what's it? I mean, blower motor doesn't mean a whole lot to me.
It's a control, and it's shorting out is all I can tell you. Again, I can have Alex at the next meeting if you want further explanation. He's explained it to me, and it took him about a half hour, so I would get it wrong if I tried to explain it to you tonight. I can tell you it's roughly $6,300.
I don't think there's a need for Alex to be here, unless you guys feel differently.
I mean, the engineers have reviewed it, it's something we need, right?
It is, like I said, the goal was to try and do as much of these upgrades during the UV disinfection project. Some of them just don't make any sense. If it would please the council, I can have Alex kind of type something up though and explain.
Yeah, it'd be
what's
good.
I
going on.
think so, if we could get, the 5-minute version.
Sure.
Maybe another half hour.
Dumb it down so
We
that
could kind of, condense it.
Ideally, more than controls of blower motor.
Right.
the council still like to move forward with the motion, or do you want to hold off?
I propose that we table it until next.
I mean, is there any difference between doing it now or doing it next meeting?
No, actually, we were trying, like I said, we were trying to hold off until the SRF funding became available, and that's 2 months from now.
Okay. Well, in that case, since we're not even gonna pay for it for 2 months, we
Yep.
might as well table it.
Are you guys fine with an email, or do you want Alex to come here in person, council meeting?
Emails.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a blurb
Yeah,
about it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Knowing what we're buying.
Yeah,
all good, Chris?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Do we
Next
need
item.
do we need to motion the table, or we just do nothing and it's?
Motion to the table, please.
I would motion that we table the blower motor control purchase.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, next item, discussion consideration of rescheduling the February 18th, 2019 council meeting. Actually, moving it to the 19th has been kind of the normal practice.
Yeah, you kind of gone back and forth between a Tuesday and Wednesday, so
19th works for me, everybody check their schedule.
Yeah, either.
Either one's fine.
There's high school registration. Wednesday would be better for me, but if we need to make it Tuesday, I can do it.
It makes snap
Yeah.
a difference, I'll be honest with you, if you go Wednesday, I'll be happy, because I'm coming back from Tennessee on Monday.
Well, then let's do Wednesday.
Let's do Wednesday then.
All right, Stephanie, make a motion.
I move that we reschedule February 18th council meeting to February 20th.
I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Next item is reports. Chief, anything from the police report you'd like to highlight, sir?
Nothing addition in the report, just wanted to let everybody know, kind of update on our training. We just did the FAST training again, Purdue Global, which is formerly Kaplan University. We try to get there at least every 2 years and do scenario-based use of force training. And Tom was able to attend this time and kind of experience some of that, so he may share some thoughts with you and different things that way too. But if there's ever an opportunity you guys want to participate in that, it's good training for us. It's good training on the use of force policies and what we're trying to implement. Allows us an opportunity to see where training needs are, live controlled scenario, and how our policies apply to that too, and educate the officers. So just want to thank Tom for coming out and everybody else too. Thanks.
Anybody have questions?
This is probably time to bring it up, but this was pretty cool. I mean, this was 2 hours, and with a pistol, with a gun in my hand, and connected to a computer with the scenarios, and there was just a one screen. At the end, Morgan mentioned that there's a system available in Dubuque where there's views on 4 sides, so it's
360.
He pulls up a scene. Well, first of all, there's orientation and education about court cases to what's appropriate use of arms and so on, and the ability to escalate one level. If someone pulls a knife on you, you can pull a gun with pretty much certainty that you have the problem. So, and then the different levels of escalation. And then he'd pull up a scenario on his computer, and then I'd see that scenario. And in 2 situations, what bad guy had a hostage, pick up the bad guy. The third one, I shot the hostage. And after each setting, there's a score comes up. How many hits? How many were fatal? How many were misses, and so on and so forth, in every scenario. It's pretty scary going to one scenario where we're chasing a car on a warrant, and they abandoned the car and went out in the woods. So you're going through the woods, wondering where you can find this person. Attempted suicide on a loading dock. Tried to shoot the guy in the leg. I didn't get there in time. He blew himself away there while I was vacillating. I will tell you that if you pull over a car with a little girl that says, "Please don't take my daddy to jail," shoot the little girl. So she'll pull a shotgun out of her car. while I'm sitting there saying, "No, she's not going to use that shotgun. She's not going to, doesn't know how to hold it. It's not loaded."
I just hope
Yeah,
somebody
my
is tuning in with
But-
absolutely
Listen to the full video.
Right, yeah, just, yeah.
Yes.
Rewind 5 minutes on the DVR, it's a whole different conversation.
I didn't mean that they even selected that one. Tom.
Well,
I think it,
but I froze when I was dead, and the officer says, "Chief Shannon's doing a notification call to your wife now." And that's how, it was real nonchalant, like, boom, oh, God.
I think the thing is though, myself included, you watch NCIS or Law and Order, and you have a picture in your mind of how all of this actually happens. So I didn't actually kill a good guy, but I did about kill a police officer because he was in plain clothes. And because I watch all those shows, he was holding a gun on the bad guy, but I didn't believe that the police officer or the person holding the gun was the police officer. So I had my gun on me the entire time, and it does put it into another perspective if you have an opportunity to go to this. The scenarios that they put you in are real life scenarios, and yeah, when you go back and get your score and realize that your first shot was 5 feet over their head, or it's pretty interesting.
This provides an opportunity to really put stress on the officers in a controlled environment in those situations. And then the biggest benefit I think that we get out of it as well, we've got a tenured department for the most part. We have officers that know what to do and know how to do it. But having them articulate and explain why they did it and really think about it through there, what court cases apply, what authority you have to use force on this person, and make them answer those questions is just going to make us better as we go through too. So I think it was a huge aspect from that standpoint too.
The rule of 21 feet, if the suspect is within 21 feet of you, don't holster your gun because he can get to you before you can pull your gun out. I didn't know that was, that.
If there's a suspect with a knife within 21 foot of an officer, that suspect can advance and injure me with the knife before I can get my gun out of the holster and react to that situation.
What if that person's Carl Lewis or something like that?
That's gonna be a little fast. That expands to 35. So, just thanks again. Like I said, we will continue to try to do this. I really encourage anybody, even if there's a time when you say, hey, I've got this, you know, we can facilitate and get in there about it anytime you want to as well. So, and thank you to Purdue Global, because it's a free opportunity for us. And we may, like Connor said, we may have to make a trip up to Dubuque one of these times too, on the 360 screen.
I think it's important that we realize we're all kind of laughing and joking, but obviously this
Very
is
serious.
what Chief and his team deal with on a daily basis, so.
And the opportunity to do that training and have that for our officers,
Yeah.
so.
Well, as I continually tell the officers, they have to make that decision within a split second.
Yep.
And then everybody else has days, weeks, months, and years to figure out, and the lawyers and judges and everybody else, if the officer was right in his split second decision. So, very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Tom.
Shoot the little girl.
Shoot them.
I don't know how you.
Don't put your gun down on it, don't hesitate. You laugh, but took my partner out too. Wow.
All right, next one is Mount Vernon Public Works Report. All right, but Nick's not here. Chris, anything that?
No, I'm not giving Nick kudos for anything. He was in Mexico during the snowstorm.
Really?
I'll give him kudos to his staff,
Yeah,
because they did an excellent job
Yeah,
in his absence.
you weren't bitter at all about that.
Now, you know, I do want to give Eldon and the group a lot of credit, because they started really early morning Saturday, and before most of us got up, a lot of the streets were covered.
Yep.
Opened up, so,
As always, though.
yeah, I
We're
just,
spoiled.
outside of my daughter, who's 16, driving on them for the first time, going, these roads suck. I'm like, these roads are awesome, you know?
Yeah.
So, a little learning curve there, but no, they did a great job. Spent a lot of time out there, obviously, so.
Question about, you issued that emergency notice, no parking on the street and so on. Do people honor that pretty well? I mean, do you have to, I don't know, tow cars, but do you ticket anybody, or is it very bad at all? Or
We didn't get any tickets this time, so it must have been
you
okay.
didn't get any tickets?
We haven't, nobody issued any citation or any parking tickets for it, so. Usually if we get the notice out, and get it out to the public, you know, it hits a couple news stories before we enact it and stuff like that, usually it goes very well.
So this would be the kind of thing that the new text-based messaging system would be.
Actually, that was the first official message sent out on the
I
text.
don't know why, I
Yep.
don't think I got it, maybe I didn't sign up before that, but anyway.
Yeah, it went out Friday at noon,
Okay.
so. Yeah, I actually had to schedule, those are tests, we're gonna schedule a message and see if it shows up when it's supposed to.
Okay, I think I went in after that.
That was good, so.
Encourage everybody to sign up for it
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
Mount Vernon City website.
Thanks, Al.
All right, Mount Vernon Parks and Rec Report, man.
Thank you, Mayor, honorary council members. I won't regurgitate what's on the report, but I do want to add one item. I got word yesterday from our Lego Robotics Club that went to the state championships that they received an award for second place in the robot design division. I think there were about 100 teams or so there, and so they were second place in that division. If you haven't seen the trophies and awards that we have for the Lego Robotics program, you can come to my office. There's about 13 of them over the last 8 years that I've been here. So this is a really quality program, and hats off to the instructors who don't get paid, they're volunteers. And I hope to invite them to a future council meeting to be recognized, if that's okay with you all.
Absolutely.
So they do a great job. The second thing I wanted to touch on was the pool report that I put in your packets. What I'm going to touch on is, the first thing I'm going to turn to is the 6-year revenue comparison, just so I can reference some items there. I'll answer any questions you have freely, but I want to recognize a few things on here. One, you'll notice in 2018 we were fully closed for 1 day. 1 day. And if you look in the past, 2013, 2014, 2015, how many days we were closed, that heater has made a huge difference. And so I thank you all and previous councils that approved that. It's made a huge difference in our operations. The days partially closed at 7, still tops out really well with previous years and previous years. So I usually do a 5-year comparison, but I wanted to expand to 6 just so you can get a broader perspective. A couple of notes that I want to make, the non-resident family passes, the reason why it's down 20 or 19 number, goes from 90 to 71, is we worked out a partnership with Southeast Lynn to handle our low-income assistance, and what we worked out was to charge those individuals a resident rate as opposed to a non-resident rate this past summer. So those numbers went from the non-resident family to the resident family, so it's just a little bit of a swap. You'll see that the difference is about the same. Our non-residents went down 19, our residents went up 20, so.
I do know that from my experience on the Southeast Lynn Board, that one thing that they're looking at is individual passes this year instead of all family passes. That would, reduce the outlay.
Yeah.
Because in some cases, where they're paying for a family pass and they're only being used by one or two people.
Yeah, we talked about that with the board members that were present. Judy Carlson was one, is that something? No, a couple of-
Chris.
Pardon?
Chris Larson,
Okay, I don't remember.
I think she's on that committee.
There were a couple of board members there that we discussed it with, just some options looking at, because we did found in the past that those passes aren't always utilized,
Right.
and especially if we have 100% scholarship towards them. So about 4 years ago, Jeff Caparos and I had agreed that we would make the families pay something for those passes, so they're vested.
Right.
Instead of getting a free pass and never using it, and we only give out so many of those, we only have money available for so many of those. So instead of having them gain access to a free pass and never using it, they're vested in by paying either 25, 50, 75%, whatever it might be. And those guidelines are set by Southeast Lynn and the HACAP guidelines that they have in place. So we just administer the program, I guess you will. They actually handle the operations of it, so the low-income assistance. Make a note of just in general, lap swim participants. And a lot of this, the daily admissions and lap swim, I think in July, we had some weather issues, being colder than normal for some odd reason in July. I have a couple of notations of some dates that were colder than normal, so those daily admissions and lap swims are down a little bit in those months. Concessions was up as well, which is a note just to make. So we're selling the same products, but I think we're doing a better job of having the inventory available, so that helps tremendously. And then general overall revenue was up, and you can see from the final totals. And just to give you an idea, to balance this out, $160,000 roughly is what our expenses were, so we're at about $23,000 subsidy. So just so you're aware kind of how that plays out, so.
That's a nice trend though, going back the last few years.
Just a broad comparison, just to see, and then especially with the heater, the last 2 years we've had the heater, it helps to see those numbers.
Yep.
Just a couple of things on the report that Katie had mentioned that I want to talk to you about is, we talked about it at Park and Rec Board last week. It's been 6 or 7 years since we've had any fee increases in the passes and the lessons and the programs and classes and rentals. So we're going to look at those. We have compared a lot of our pricing across the board to communities like us, as well as communities that are close to us. And, we're not a similar facility to a lot of those. Give you an example, Cedar Rapids has all aquatic centers. We can't compete with that. But, Marion has a different kind of a pool, and North Liberty and Anamos and everybody. So putting apples to apples is a little difficult, but we don't want to price ourselves out of the market by raising our fees too much. But yet, at the same token, it's been 7 years since I think we've raised our prices. So we're taking a look at that. We'll make a recommendation at Park and Rec Board. Katie and I will make a recommendation. Park and Rec Board will approve that, and then I'll bring it to council for your approval. Okay, we'll take a look at that. Signage, new signs. We're going to look at getting some new signage this year. We've had the same signs for a long time. It's time to update those. So that's one of the things that we've purchasing. Violence policy plan. So the state requires us to have certain plans in place, emergency action plan, certain plans that are in place. Well, this is one they've added to the pools and aquatic centers, is have a violence policy plan. So meaning if the fight takes place within the pool confines, what we do, how do we react to that, how do we handle that? So we will be coming up with a violence policy plan and implementing that through our staff.
Not to make a bad joke, but
We slur up and out of the chairs is the extent of the plan.
Especially if it's a girl.
There is a hostage song we.
Right, yeah, just call
Mel
that
Gibson
down.
said, shoot the house.
Unless you want to negotiate.
You don't let shotguns in the pool though.
Yeah.
No, they're not allowed in the pool, but there's a chain link fence, so.
Concealed
Yeah.
carry.
A water gun.
Concealed carry.
And the last thing we'll be looking at is a PA system. We've had the same PA system, I think it's 20-some years old, and we can't find parts for it. We're struggling to keep it alive, so we're looking at that as another purchase as well, so.
Good.
Okay. Any questions in regards to the pool report?
No, it's just nice to see it in black and white.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
thank you for the detail.
You're welcome. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Matthew. All right, next items is possible budget CIP communication. Chris, just jump right into library, anything you wanted to mention?
No, I just, as I pointed out in my memo, there's only 2 of the additional budgets outside of what our normal budgets are that are asking for increases. The library being one, and we made some increases last year to help with salaries. But
Anybody else hear that?
Yeah.
It's not me, I checked.
It's done, okay. That was with my mind.
So I've invited both the library and the ambulance service, each of which are asking for larger than normal increases this year, to speak to the council so that you can ask any questions. The rest of them are either pretty small or there's no change, and I didn't feel it was necessary to have each of those individual groups come and ask for the same dollars that they received last year. So trying to whittle the list down for you to save a little bit of time. And after the presentation by the library, then I have some more materials that I'll discuss with you about the remaining budget. So.
With that said,
All
Becky,
right.
welcome.
And this is Bruno, right? Oh, that's
Yep.
so. I'm also quiet. Okay, I'm Kathy Boggs, I'm the Public Library Director. And once again this year, we are asking for an increase. And one of the reasons, I've sent you a letter, so you should have all of that, and I met with Chris about it. So when I started 21 years ago and it was already in place, the city gives Cole Library $6,000. And that is sort of overhead and what I would like to call sort of use and maintenance. And I know you can all imagine that in 21 years, 25 years, however long that's been, that things have increased. And not only that, we've kind of taken over the entire first floor. So I wanted to make a recommendation that we bring that more into line of the amount of space that we use and the amount of wear and tear that we put on that building. You know, we pay, in that building, when I first started, I just had a desk. Now I have an office with a door, and Grace has my old desk, and all of the things in that building, we don't pay for any of it, not the lights, not the carpet, none of it. But we have movies in there every early out day, and we just had to, Cornell just replaced the carpet in there. I replaced the shades, the room darkening shades from my budget. But I just feel like we really need to increase the amount that we pay to be in that building, to share that building. Because I feel like we share the facility, but we really are not sharing the cost of what it takes to have that building open. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that.
I don't have that CIP one in front of me. What numbers are you proposing?
So did you all get that?
It's not in the packet.
No.
No, it's not in the packet. So the increase is about 12,500.
So from 6 to 12,500
Or from 6 to 18.
No, the actual increase
is how much?
is
For everything.
for everything is 12,500.
Okay.
So it represents about a 14% increase from their overall budget. Last year, they were 85,000. This year, they're requesting 97,550.
There we go.
So we're still under $100,000.
Okay, I'm sorry, I thought you had this is the letter I sent in with all my budget stuff. Okay. So,
And
So-
most of that, I mean, that is your salary, isn't it? I
Yeah,
remember correctly, okay, yeah.
between Grace and I.
Yeah.
So I think last year it was salary specific.
Mm-hmm.
This year, when Kathy and I talked, when they had to make up ground, and
So that's the acquisition part,
Yeah.
do you want me to go into that?
yeah, so kind of the
Okay.
biggest aspect of this, because it's not tied directly to staff, or the building, both of which are significantly less than what we would normally see. Just the acquisition part was kind of
Okay.
the,
Alright.
Major driver.
yeah.
Yeah, so that is our when I come to you with our budget, there's no fat in our budget. You see my budget, we're running that library for, $85,000, most of which are salaries. And so when anything comes up during the year, and we make this budget without our county funds, so the county gives us so much money per year, but that pie is not cut until after I come to you and you set my budget. So if it's less than what we think they're going to give us, and we never know because we're in with all the other Lynn County libraries, any deficits that we have to make up, we take out of our acquisition line. That's the only line that we can manipulate within it. And so because different things have happened, the county money's been less the last probably 4 years. And then, like our advertising in the Sun went up. So we kept whittling away at our acquisition fund. And so it has actually decreased. So in 2015, it was 18,577, and today we've dropped it down to 11,000. And so all of that money has gone into other things in the library that we have to pay for. So what we're asking is to have a 2-year increase. So this year you'd increase 4,000, and next year we'd increase 4,000, and then we'd be back up to around that 18,500 mark. And so acquisition means like the books, the DVDs, the audio books, and also audio books that we can pay for privately on Bridges, which is our ebook that you can download for free onto your phone or your computer or whatever. And if you think about the library, and people ask me constantly, are libraries still relevant? Are people still checking out materials when they can stream? The answer is yes. We circulated over 24,000 materials last year, 54% which go directly to Mount Vernon citizens. So the Mount Vernon citizens are checking out more materials in that library than anybody else. And that does not include like open access, people from Lisbon, Cedar Rapids, Seoul who come and use our materials. That's just Mount Vernon citizens. Our number one circulating items are children's books, followed closely by DVDs, and then fiction, and then nonfiction. So those are our requests.
I will say, based on that budget, in the acquisition items, you're doing a wonderful job, because whenever I read the articles in the Sun and see what you're putting out, you guys are very responsive to the needs of the community, and so kudos to you for that on the budgets that's been turned.
Thank
Just
you.
want to say that.
Could I ask one question of
Sure.
clarification?
Thanks.
You indicated that the population of Mount Vernon uses a library more than the students at Cornell.
Yes. They check out more materials.
Are we getting a deal? If,
Yeah.
I'm surprised that's true. but I
It's
guess,
been that way for quite a while, right, Kathy?
Yes, it has been.
I mean, that's kind of the norm.
Right, and what that means though too is, they are also, when in their lines, they are checking out our materials as well as their own. So, if they're checking something out, like you're checking out more than they are, but when they're checking out, a lot of times they're checking out movies that we purchase. It's truly a combined and shared environment. Nothing is limited to any area of the library.
Do you have any numbers on the programming? Like, I know that
Oh, yeah,
the children's,
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
programming that you guys.
you have a year-end report,
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
and then
that's
all
right.
those figures are in there.
Okay.
Yeah, it was several hundred events over the course of the year that you guys.
We have 360,
Yeah.
like 2 events
Yeah.
in the year. and they're all free. I mean, that's the thing that I want you to all remember, that
Right.
we don't charge for anything that we provide at the library. So,
Yeah, I think everybody fully should be aware of this really is a huge bargain for what we get.
Although we forget, I grew up here,
mhm.
so
Yeah.
this is the norm that I know, but you forget that this isn't, you know, for a town this size, I have a library that size, isn't how it usually works. So-
No, and because of so much that is taken care of for us by student workers, that allows Grace and I to focus on this programming. You know, I'm not putting the
That's a
books
good
back
point,
on the
actually,
shelf.
yeah, right.
I'm
Right.
not wrapping them in
Mhm.
plastic.
Mhm.
I'm not putting the barcodes on. That all is happening behind the scenes. And that allows us to spend time developing programming and all that. What I think about are all the kids like on early out days. You know, they just come to the library.
Yeah. It's really vital to the service of those kids.
So,
So Chris, from the staff recommendation?
So we'll start putting budgets into the state forums this Friday. I feel fairly good about this year. I'm not so sure about next year. The reason I feel good about this year is rollback increased. So we should see a small uptick in general fund dollars, and then we have some decreases in some other areas. So again, I feel okay this year. I'll know more when we start getting those numbers into the state forms, but next year, all depends on what they do, and I won't know until typically November, December, when we have our league meeting. So then I release what they're gonna have to roll back. That number fluctuates, obviously, year to year, and 1% either direction can be a significant difference to us, so. This year though, and I'll run down this after you're done with questions with Kathy, but for the most part, our overall budget is down close to 200,000, so.
And again, we're not taking any action tonight. It's
No, I just,
Q&A and
I just wanted to be able to talk with you about
Yeah.
the conversation I had with Chris and to kind of explain to you, you know, why we're asking for an increase again. Because we just did the salaries last year, because Grace got her master's degree.
Yep.
And we didn't want to lose her for sure. But I just wanted to know if you had any other questions for me or any concerns about the library or our budget.
Once we do decide on this, then the county will make their decision. Please communicate to City Hall and through Chris to us about what the county ends up doing. You know, if it's still
Well-
continuing trending down, or,
And that's for next year. I mean, I won't get that funded.
I know it'll be after the,
Right,
Yeah.
like I don't have you know, you gave us our money in July. July 1.
yeah.
We don't have our county funds yet. We don't know what that is yet.
Still,
We're just doing that right now, yeah. The contract will come out. All those things are due in October, and all those numbers are due. We turn those in October 30th. So I never know when I come to you with my budget, what that pie will be. So I can tell you probably by the end of this week what those funds are, because we've already started that ball rolling with the other libraries in the county. But most libraries have a general fund, just like you all do. So if one budget goes over, they can just keep paying their bills. Because I'm kind of sitting off by myself over there, we have, 1 year we didn't get our county funds until May, if you can imagine that. I mean, I was freaking out.
yeah,
So, you know, it all just depends on when those numbers, and we've changed some of the policy with the county from that time, and different things have happened, but, yeah, those county funds, don't come in July when yours come. They come much later, so.
Two fewer supervisors, the county should be flush. So.
Yeah.
Maybe so, I'll let you
That
know.
260 is gonna make a huge difference.
So thank you always for your support of the library. I always feel like when I come, you know, you're all smiling, you're all
Yep.
happy about us being here, so, and I appreciate that. It helps
Micromanaging.
support
Well, we
the
appreciate what you guys do.
Yeah,
yeah.
Well, we're happy to do it.
huge value. Thank you, Kathy. Anybody
You bet.
have questions? All right. Thank you, Kathy.
You bet.
All right, Chris, the initial budget review.
So, at this point, I'll give you a little good news to start. We had originally talked about potential for garbage fees to increase this fiscal year, because we had an increase from Wapsie Waste. Talked to the mayor and talked to Sue about the fact that we would like to hold off on that potential increase until October, November of 19. We're going to hedge our bets on the fact that our taking over the LEAP program is going to work well, and that we'll be able to save about $30,000 in Wapsie fees. If that's the case, about $10,000 of that $30,000 savings would go to offset the increase in Wapsie's fees. My guess is that $20,000 will get, some of it will get used internally on our equipment and so on and so forth. But as long as we can absorb that $10,000 increase, we should be okay and not require an increase in garbage fees. So
Until that time.
potentially, if the LEAP program is functioning the way that we want to, and we don't have to revert back to Wapsie Waste, then we won't have to increase fees. At least not until we look at the contract once again.
So I was gonna say, at that point, how far will we be about halfway into the contract with them?
Halfway.
Okay.
Yep. Now, the bad news is, for those that have been on the council for a little while, water rates and sewer rates are set to increase 3% every year and have been. That is set to sunset, or was set to sunset June of 2019, so this coming June. I'm telling you that you're going to have to extend those 10 more years, that 3% increase, because you have, for 10 more years. You have
3% a year?
You have $1.6 million in UV disinfection that's coming into the sewer. You have another $1.5 million coming 7 years from now for the nutrient reduction strategies. We are lucky in that regard that our permit only requires the UV and nutrient reduction, and we're not required to build a new plant, as some communities are. Some communities are seeing 15 and 20% increases in their sewer rates immediately, like overnight. Water could probably go 5 years. The nice part about taking them both out 10 years, though, is that if one of them reaches a point where our revenues are exceeding our expenses by 25%, you can actually not increase it for that year. So it hasn't happened yet because we've done projects with both of those funds. Water is a possible scenario if we don't have to do anything with wells. The water treatment facility was our major expense. It was over 500-some thousand. But when they first did this ordinance increasing the 3%, the expected UV disinfection cost was about $300,000. We're at 1.6 million. So the UV disinfection portion of that project is slated to be somewhere around $950,000. So what I think they had projected at $300,000 was not actually what was going to work for our facility and get approved by DNR. So project to see those ordinances in front of you before June of 2019. I will let you contemplate the water. I know it needs to go out 5 years. If it needs to go out beyond that, like I said, there's a stopgap in there. But if you want to sunset that 5 years from now and then rediscuss, that's completely up to you. The sewer, you know, I think that sunsets need to be there because I don't want to have something in perpetuity and then hopefully have somebody remember that they need to check their revenue and expense accounts. So this reminds everybody that it only gets 10 years, but knowing full well that you're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of $3 to $3.5 million worth of improvements at the sewer plant mandated by the state, there's not much I can do about it.
You're saying 3% every year for 10 years. What's
In
that?
sewer.
Has anybody projected what that would be on average for a person?
I have not, I will when the ordinances come forward.
Because the gentleman that was in here, he passed away, what, 6 months ago, a year ago. He was always in here worried about $20 here, $15 there. And there's others like that, and you're 3% every year. That's a lot for people on fixed income, so it's a bad deal that the state and the federal government can mandate stuff like that and not care about your citizens.
Well, and they don't. Like I said, some other communities have seen double-digit increases in multiple years. So we are lucky in that manner. There are communities that are obviously smaller that have fewer people to spread those costs to, that are having to do the same types of projects that we are. I'm going to tell you right now, by the time we start the second project, the second phase of this, it will be about time to renew our permit through the state, and a whole new host of requirements could be handed down to us. So, no, I mean, obviously, I don't want to see this happen. We have to meet a parity test though, for the SRF funding. They're 20-year notes. We do have some debt, so I've structured the second borrowing at the time when our existing note goes away. So I'm kind of crossing my fingers that we won't see an effect, and after the 10 years we may not have to do anything. It never seems to work out that way for me, but
But by 10 years, the damage is done anyways.
yeah. So like I said, it's not necessarily something that I want to do. And we can put a 5-year sunset on both, if you would like, and then revisit this subject again in 5 years. You can really do what you want. I leave that up to you. Why I'm bringing it up tonight is to let you contemplate this for a few weeks, make some decisions that way. So I'm going to quickly run down each of the departments to give you a rough idea where we're at. Police's increase is less than 1%. We purchased or made a motion to purchase the fire engine, so actually the 350% increase in fire that you were going to see is actually going to be much less.
It's a solid budget.
Yeah. So fire is always one of those that looks like it increases significantly because their capital projects are all stuck in their existing operating budget. So that one will change. Emergency management, humane society, no change. Ambulance is the one that you will see or hear from at the next meeting. It's a $4,500 increase, basically $1 per capita. We are working or trying to work with the city of Lisbon on.
That's a joke. That's a joke. Put me on record. Lisbon's a joke when they take their funds away from something like that. That's pathetic.
We would be looking at a 5-year increase, scheduled increases. $1 this year, 50 cents for each of the following years at the ambulance services. Lisbon will obviously have to agree to that before I would recommend us increasing our side. So we'll wait to see if that happens. But I want to give the new director, Jacob, an opportunity to stand in front of you as well, talk about some of the changes that they're making down there. Library was a 14% increase. Building inspections, this is kind of a misnomer. It decreased $35,000, but that's a pass-through with Lynn County, so all we did is they're taking that revenue direct and not having to get it from us. So Historical Society, Area Arts Council, Heritage Days, the band, and Southeast Lynn, all with no change this year. Cable TV decreased $4,000, cemetery by $2,000. Parks increased by a little 6.5%. That has to do with the adjustment of Matt's salary over the 2 years. So if you remember correctly, we're trying to get him in line by the time the facility opens. Take that portion out, it's a very small increase. Pool is increasing, and that's why I've asked Parks and Rec Board to look at whether or not it's time to pass any increases. So that's a 6% increase as well. Economic development and beautification stayed the same. Admin was up 1.8%. Streets was up 0.45%. waste is down 16%, water's down 6.5%.
How is waste down 16?
Capital projects. So every time that I get into streets, waste, water, sewer, storm, I try to get as many capital projects in their operating funds as possible, as much as the revenues will allow. So they're gonna fluctuate significantly year to year.
Right.
And so,
We're not picking up
Yeah.
16% less waste.
no,
I can
you,
guarantee
when you
that.
see the 16% drop in percentage increase, part of that is the waste was contributing to the bypass plan. So that
Okay,
expense is
sure.
gone this year. It also does provide equipment purchases that we try to split them between all of the enterprise funds. So when you start to see the decrease, that's why you'll see all of these decreasing. Sewer's down 3.5%, storm is down 3.5%. I'm doing my best not to try and borrow from another fund in stormwater to offset that loss, and so far the auditors have not put the heat on me to get rid of that deficit quicker. But in the last 3 years, we've reduced that deficit by about $5,000 a year, give or take. So overall, since we're gonna take the fire truck and have to amend the budget this year, we're going to be down somewhere in the neighborhood of 200,000. Whoa.
Where are we on water, and does that include the radio reads?
No.
That's what I figured.
So I should back up, when you're contemplating the radio read, if we do the radio read, then you might as well look at we can go 5-year and 5-year, but it's going to be 10-year and 10-year realistically. Because the radio read conversion is a $500,000 project. Now, on the flip side, taxes are set to stay at $12.99. Right now, franchise fees are beating projections, so I do believe that you're going to have some increasing amounts of project funding for parks and infrastructure especially. We have some other large projects that are hanging out there. First Street, Palisades, all of those are timing related projects, but ones I'm keeping a close eye on right now. So we are in a lot better shape than a lot of cities. There are other cities that are doing slightly better than us. We have a lot of commercial space, but
Anybody have any questions for Chris?
Thank you.
Yeah,
All right.
I think that's some of this.
Next item is demolition ordinance.
so the first document that I gave you was the document that I last received from Guy Booth. And it was the one that we had a work session on, and there were some issues about how long the Historic Preservation Commission could hold up a demolition, so on and so forth. So I've been waiting on discuss changes for a while, and I just decided to go ahead and implement changes that I thought would make the document more livable. So the second document, the chapter 153 that you see, is basically the ordinance from Guy Booth with a lot of red marks in it. If you like where this is going, then I would go ahead and take the red marks off and send this over to Historic Preservation and allow them to take a look at it. But what I did, I tried to take a number of the comments and put them in there. So obviously everything requires a demolition permit. If you have a house that you're going to demolish anywhere in the community, there will be a permit with a signature page on it that will be required to get signatures that state that you've cut the utilities in the manner that they're supposed to. This is fairly standard and normal. The next paragraph, 15302, talks about demolition of historically significant buildings. So anything that was built prior to 1950 or in the historic districts would get a secondary review by historic preservation. So that, if you see, I didn't really cut out a significant amount of those with the exception of 15304. I changed the wording and I took this directly out of our existing floodplain ordinance has a historic structure definition, so I made them similar. And that's why the language change is there. But it does give Historic Preservation Commission more time to work and review demolition permits of historically significant structures. It does not give them the ability to stop the demolition of historically significant structures.
I thought when we were discussing this previously, that we were gonna have a time limitation anymore. I thought it was just gonna be historic preservation districts or defined, or places that were defined as historic. In 1950, I thought, because again, it gives anybody with a house in 1950, then they have authority to look it over.
Yes, so what the previous ordinance said is anything that's over 50 years,
right.
and it's a moving target. So I actually went back to 1950, which is further back than what it would be today, and just said this is the starting point. We can go back to a moving 50-year period if you would like.
No, I just think it should be in the historic district or be labeled as historic property right now. Because they shouldn't have authority to say that my house cannot be demolished, a part of my house can't be demolished because mine was built in 1885. They shouldn't have that authority.
They don't.
Unless it's designated right now as a historic building, which it is not,
Yeah.
they shouldn't have that authority over my house.
Well, I think,
And they won't under this.
to your
Yes,
Well,
they will. It says 1950 or?
They will have
I mean, they
they
can't
will,
stop it.
they will have a 14-day review period.
Yeah. But
In which
ultimately, they can't
They
stop
can
it.
sit down with the homeowner, but ultimately, no, they cannot stop you. from
They can sit down with me and
It
say
does-
what?
It does, they can sit down and basically point out there is grant programs if you want to try and renovate the structure. Before, they could basically stop you
Yeah.
from, there was no appeal per se, except to the zoning board of adjustment, which all current historic preservation commission rulings get appealed to city council. So that's where this goes now. I wanted to keep that consistent as well.
so I do have a question. In that section 153.02, clearly designated as a historic place by the National Register. We have 3 of them, those are very clearly defined, we know what they are. What I'm stumbling over is, lies within a historic preservation district as defined by the city of Mount Vernon.
We have ways.
We have,
If you have a house in that district,
Well, those are the National Register districts. What I'm saying is.
not every local historic preservation district is on the National Registry.
Okay.
So you have to basically state where. The
Okay.
city has more
So I just wanted to
power.
make sure that we do have that
Yeah.
defined.
The cities have, yes, so each one of the cities' historic preservation districts are delineated on a map and defined specifically by streets. Not all of them are in.
In the
National
National
Register.
Register. Okay.
So there is a difference and you have to identify both.
Where's that, is that information readily available to?
Yeah, it's actually on the website,
Okay.
but we have the maps at City Hall if you
Okay.
would like a copy.
I just wanted to make sure it was defined somewhere.
One of the other items that we talked about when they said, if you go to, 15306 and then 15307, before they could hold it up for a matter of 6 months and try and force you into working with a seller to move it or some other fashion. And again, I've taken the city out of the position to be a negotiator with property owners. So there is an aspect in here that you can't just allow historic structures to go bad in order to tear them down. If you do, it's going to take you much longer to get a demolition permit. But in your case, Eric, it slows your application down by 14 days for sure.
So, let me get this straight. So, let's say I'm never gonna tear my house down. Let's just say, for some reason, I'm gonna tear my house down. I file for the demolition, they say, they got 14 days, and I say, I don't wanna talk to you, I wanna wait 14 days, don't come to me, I don't wanna talk to you, I wanna wait 14 days, and then I'm gonna go on. That's all it is. I don't have to talk to them, they're not gonna force me to talk. I wait 14 days, I'm done.
No. So the initial period is 14 days. If historic preservation comes back and says the building is historically significant, according to National Registered guidelines, then there is an automatic 60-day period.
See,
And
that's
this was
what-
part of
that's what
the
I'm
previous
afraid of.
ordinance as well. So,
I don't like it.
if, like I said, if your home is determined to be historically significant, this will elongate the demolition process for at least 2.5 months. I've taken out a lot of beyond that 2.5 months, but I've left in portions of the rest because we did not discuss removing that segment.
But again, they have a database. They have a database of all these houses that they have deemed significant. If they'd at least notify the homeowners of that position, they could at least say, well, at least, okay, it could be 74 days. Now I'll get this process started a little bit sooner. They got this, they should just put those on the thing. That's what, they got it. It's not like they have to create this database. It should be based on their database.
Well, and I want to point
And
out,
it's not a
that
tough
this
thing to do.
is not being driven by staff. I'm just trying to
Yeah.
get it to a position where you tell staff to either leave it alone or keep working on it. Because it's been hanging on our agenda for a year.
Like I said, I've been in construction a long time. 14 days and 74 days is a long time, and it beats the crud out of your schedule. And that's bad when you don't know what's going on. Especially if you just go out and, oh, it's 14 days, or you don't even know it's 14 days. A lot of people don't look at the demolition ordinance. They just go in, I'm gonna tear this down. Oh, well, first it's this, and then it's this, and so you started in March, now you get started in July. Now you're not even under roof when the snow's flying, so, yeah, I don't like that.
Well, we can't be
Well, I
held
do
responsible for
know.
people not looking at ordinances. I mean, by
Right,
that
and
argument,
and
we wouldn't write any ordinance ever.
And I do
So-
know the real estate documentation on the disclosure says, is your home within a historic preservation district? But it's possible that people are answering that question based on the national registry. You know what I'm saying? That's the issue, that when people go to purchase a home here, are they fully knowledgeable
Well,
about
they should be,
where it's?
because you're required to disclose it when you know it, and it's.
But that's what I'm saying, that definition is not very clear, that some of them are in the National Registry and other of them are in this expanded historic preservation district that we have citywide. So, I mean, it's just, there
Well,
there
but
does
to
need
be
to be
fair,
some
we've
clarity.
also got signs on a lot of the street corners. I mean, you have to work pretty hard.
Those are
to
the
do
ones
that.
that are in the
National.
national.
Those are only the national?
Yes,
Okay.
and see, that's
Well-
where, that's, yeah,
Well, and
so.
so,
Agreed, but but part of why people buy into the city of Mount Vernon and why a lot of people move here is because of its historic nature and what we can do to protect that while keeping things reasonable and respecting property owners' rights to, you know, within the confines of the community, do what they want to do with it. I mean, I think there are enough resources available for property owners to learn what rules apply to their property and what don't. That, yes, we could make it more clear, we could send out notifications, but then we gotta be willing to pay for those, right? I mean, we've got a lot of, anybody who walks in the front door at City Hall, anybody who anybody who works here can pull up a map and tell you, yes, you're on this list and that list. So it isn't as though we are keeping this information from people.
Right.
So
Right.
it is, I think it's, I think, both Stephanie's and Eric's points are well taken, but it's incumbent upon the property owner to learn the rules of the community that they're moving into or now want to demolish something within. And it's just the way that communities work.
But these rules are, that's the fact. The fact is, they don't know it, and neither does the historical commission. They determine it after the fact. So 14 days, they got an, oh, you know what, I think there's some, like, I got these 6-foot pocket doors. Oh, those are significant now, and now you can't tear it down. You don't know until they determine that your house is that way. It's not like you've moved in and you know that there's something about it. They determine later on whether it is or isn't. So it has nothing to do with whether the homeowner bought it and he knew it and didn't know it. They don't know it until the Historic Preservation Commission says, yeah, there's something there that we like. See, there's nothing there.
Can they do that, Chris, or do they have to check all these boxes before it's deemed historically significant?
So they can deem it historically significant based upon the guidelines, but they can't actually change somebody's, or put it in a district or make it a national register without your permission. What they, I think, and I'm just going off of memory as we've been discussing this, I think the point that came back from historic preservation was the fact that if they're historically significant and you're thinking about tearing it down, this would stay the process long enough for them to potentially apply for a grant, to either purchase the property, move the property, do something else with the property. And if you read if you go back and read the original, they have significant leeway from the one that I'm putting in front of you.
Yeah, big difference.
But yes, I mean, to be honest with you though, I think you saw that, I believe in Iowa City, there were some homes, 5 or 6 of the homes at the end of a block where they weren't in a historic significant area, and people sued anyway. They sought injunctive relief regardless, which they could do here as well, by the way. That's not privy just to Iowa City, but they're not in the historic preservation district. They were deemed historically significant by the people that lived in the general neighborhood. And they did, I believe they sued the city to try and get those stopped. So if somebody is in what would probably be deemed a historic home, you could potentially have issues beyond this demolition ordinance regardless. So I think from staff's perspective, I just tried to put in an ordinance all the comments that were made at the previous discussions. The appeal process, trying to reduce the length of time. I've gone about as far as I can go without you telling me whether or not you want to continue.
So to Eric's point though, and it's a point well taken, that they are coming in after the fact. So maybe part of what we could do, I like what we've got, maybe personally. I think the timeframes are pretty realistic, pretty reasonable. But to provide an opportunity for people to be proactive, even if they're not considering the demolition right now. I live in a house that was built in the 1880s. There's no question that it would be considered historically significant, even in I don't know, probably 7 different historic neighborhoods. But for people who have any question, providing some opportunity for them to get in touch with, to be proactive about it, to get in touch with historic preservation, come through my house, make a determination. Because the guidelines that they're going off of are nationally registered, or nationally recognized guidelines. I mean, it isn't some guy making it up, right? I mean, it's, so. I guess my point being, if we could be proactive about it and say, listen, here's the ordinance we just passed, or are considering. Here, if you have any question about your house, here is somebody you could call. Here is an avenue you could take to get that determination made.
So let me give you a little background, I think, on why this happened for all those that weren't part of this original discussion. Shortly after I took this position, there were 2 homes on Cornell's campus. Now, Cornell's campus is all on the National Register.
Right.
I believe those that were upset about those 2 homes being torn down were upset at the speed in which it happened and the fact that we couldn't prevent them from being demolished. If you look at Historic Preservation Commission guidelines today, if you are in that historic district, you still have to get a notice of no significant impact from HPC. So if you're in one of those districts or on the National Register, you already have to go to them before you can get a demolition permit. I think the rub was, once they issued that certificate of no significant impact, Cornell was free to tear them down, and I think some of the individuals that came were upset about the fact that, you know, they only had a month, more or less, to react to that demolition. So if you read through the original version, you will see there's an elongated time period for all of this to take place. Try to shrink that back up a little bit again, but that is the premise. My understanding
Yeah,
is.
but I
how that all
understand why
happened.
that would be so in a historical district. That makes sense to me. You know you're in a historic district. I understand why you want that process to be stretched out. But if you're not, then there's no reason to stretch it out. I'd put the teeth in the districts. I'd put the teeth, because they know it. Everybody knows when they sign their mortgage and everything that they're in a historic district. The people who aren't shouldn't have to go through that. That's what I'm saying here. You want to give, and that would have prevented them 2 buildings from being torn down, that's fine with me, but it's just,
And
it's
even though
just
it
those
wouldn't have
people who
prevented
don't
those
know it.
buildings from being torn down, I want you to understand that even this ordinance only delays it for about 74 days. It does give people time to react. It probably does give somebody that wanted to battle this issue in court more ability to do so. I'm not advocating for this, I'm just trying to give you.
I would
an
advocate for even a longer period within those districts, because like I said, they know what they got into. They know what they got into. If it was 3 months for that, I would, but like I said, they know what they got into. It's the people that are outside that limit. They don't know what they got into now that we're changing the rules on it.
And we
That's what
can, like I
want.
said, I could make a little verbiage change and you would leave it to either something on the National Register or in with a designated historic preservation district.
And it'd even be nice if that database that they have was on like the city website, that they could actually go look and see if, hey, are we on that list that they think that are potential historic, you know, items, you know, it'd be nice. You
But
can type in your address and
Scott,
look.
my house was built in 1881, but I'm not in either one of those historic.
But are you on their list though?
But that's the thing, and I do see Eric's point. I think it's a valid point, that we need to provide a better process of communicating that to people.
Yep, yep.
Because you clearly know if you're buying one right in the National Registry area, but otherwise, there's no insight into that list.
Well, then it becomes somewhat
And there's a
subjective.
lot of homes,
Yeah.
there's a large number of homes that would fit in that.
Yeah, built after 1950.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
yeah, 1950, that seems kind
Yeah,
of
but
subjective in and of
you don't know.
It is,
what-
and as I put in my
It probably
explanation,
is.
Yeah.
it's
But,
truly.
but the original sliding scale of 50 years,
Yes.
I mean, was
Why that?
Better than that, that's for sure.
1969 now,
Right.
right? I mean, that's a split level ranch is what that is, you know?
Yeah.
Shag carpeting.
Right, I mean, in which,
But,
yes,
but
historically significant, I think we can all agree on
who are
that.
we
Yeah.
to decide
Yeah.
that
They
1969
might say it
shag
reminds
carpet?
them of the Brady
Right,
Bunch.
exactly.
That's right.
Yeah.
That orange
I
stuff.
mean-
might
Yes,
come
there
back.
is quite a process to get a home on the National Register or to create a historic preservation district. There's public hearings, so on and so forth. So to your point, Eric, I would agree, there's a significant amount of work that goes into this designation process. And usually those that are getting designated are privy to that process and want it to happen.
At least when they
Um,
but that subsequent purchaser isn't.
From a staff perspective, I don't know that the process that we have now is wrong. But going back to the Cornell issue, that same thing could happen again.
Yeah.
just so you're aware.
And like I said, I don't have a problem
So-
with beefing that up.
Yeah, I guess the question, I just, it's been on the shelf for a
Right.
year. I went back and tried to recreate all of the comments that I had so far and put that in there. This is a moving target. If you wanna make it just historic National Register or in the preservation districts, we can do that as well. We can discuss it further at another meeting.
Do a
It's
little
just
research on that.
wanted to get a document in front of you finally.
I'll just recommend shoot Chris an email if you guys have any ideas. I would like to get this done as well, because
Yeah.
this has been
Mhm.
talked about ad nauseum for 2+ years.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of hair on fire, then all of a sudden it's just falling off the face of the earth with certain.
Well, and the
individuals.
problem is that's what happens, and then the next
Something-
time around,
an issue
something
arises.
else is gonna, so I mean, let's keep in mind, this has been triggered by something that happened 2 years ago. so-
Exactly,
But-
right.
And nothing in between, but
We
still.
could nail those two down, and then you could always amend it later when you come up with a process to do the other houses.
Yeah,
That way, you definitely make sure that these ones in the historic, when you go through this, you could definitely knock that down. And like I said, then you can amend it to, well, we come up with
To expand it.
an idea of how to notify these homeowners and stuff like this, that no.
Or here's a publicly
Absolutely no
available
idea.
database, and if you
Yeah.
don't know, just put your address in and call
I
it.
think that's
would it
really,
be value to invite Leah to a meeting and just have a
Who would be
conversation
the
with her?
contact who owns that database?
So, there are a number of individuals that operate with HPC. Leah is the current chairperson,
Leah.
Roger.
Who's Leah?
Rogers.
Oh,
That's why I wonder if it'd be any value to have them invite her to a meeting and.
I think it kind of depends.
Wouldn't that make
I
it
mean,
worse?
again, they're going to obviously push for longer wait periods, and I believe Hugh Lifson was one of the members that was here and wanted it citywide,
Yeah.
you know, for them, HPC to review every demolition ordinance. So
Not gonna
I think that kind of depends on you as a council. I will do whatever you'd like me to do. We can invite them to a meeting. Yeah, I think it's a question of whether or not you feel like it's advantageous. So if, you know, you're extremely driven and probably not going to change your mind about where you want to be, if you can just tell me where you want to be, and you know, I can provide a couple of different options.
Let's do that. Yeah.
yeah. It's a fine line that we're walking between
I don't disagree with you.
valuing the historic significance of the community and the value of that itself with the integrity of ownership.
And at the same time, this is something that we deal with once every blue moon.
I know.
So I don't have.
I always tell people too, it's not as if I sit in my office and try to come up with new laws only to complicate my life more. So,
Yeah.
yes, definitely moving forward. Just if you want to express by email, and then I can kind of tailor what comments I'm getting and put a couple different documents together for you to review. This was a good starting point, I thought, because I tried to get as many of the previous comments as possible.
I would definitely do one with that. And like I said, it can be amended. It's not like we can't do anything to it, but right now, that's kind
That's
of
a good start.
a gray area. So
Yep, agreed.
let's take care of the ones that we know we want to keep.
Mhm.
All right, anything else on that? In terms of reports, only thing I had my EMA meeting last Tuesday night, which is the Emergency Management Agency, which is made up of local mayors and other individuals. Again, just really, we usually have 4 or 5 meetings throughout the year, but main item that we did last Tuesday was just approve the budget, so really nothing else to report from that. So if anybody has anything from a council committee reporting standpoint, anybody? Chris, city administrator's report?
Provided you your bound copies of the audit, no real deficiencies other than separation of duties that we get noted every year, and will regardless of what we do. We're going to start the SRF funding process, borrowing process here in the next couple of months, as well as getting the bid ready to go for the UV disinfection. That has to be done by August. The remainder of the project will be done, I think, June of 2020. So the 2 large screw pumps will be the second portion of that. right now projected to come in under 1.6. The nice part about it is it's a reimbursement from SRF, so we don't have to borrow money all at once. So we kind of tailor our borrowing. And finally, the League of Women Voters has invited myself and my staff, 3 members of my staff, to kind of present a state of the city presentation. Be a slideshow of about an hour long, and then about a half hour worth of questions. So from 7 to 8:30 at the First Street Building in the theater auditorium.
Tomorrow night?
Yes.
I just want to say that on ML King Day, it's probably appropriate as well, or more appropriate. I saw a great presentation by Thomas Newkirk at the auditorium that was sponsored by the school on implicit bias. It was very thought-provoking. And I was thankful that the school brought it to town, which is a civil rights attorney. Things that we need to think about.
Anybody else have anything else? No further business, meeting stands adjourned.